This is Giselle Tiocayo from Section MT1-8 taking up Bachelor of Science in Tourism Management.
This is Joshua Marici Enriquez from Section MT1-8 taking up Bachelor of Science in Tourism and Management.
This is Angela Crisador from Section MT1-8 taking up Bachelor of Science in Tourism Management.
I'm Ian Leonard Arveloso from Section MT1-8 taking up Bachelor of Science in Tourism Management.
I'm Alexander Marie V. Luciano from Section MT1-8 taking up Bachelor of Science in Tourism Management.
Hi! We are the first Presentor and we will tackle about Antonio Pigafetta's Voyage. Francisco Antonio Pigafetta is a famous Italian traveler born in Vicenza around 1490 and died in the same city in 1534, who is also known by the name of Antonio Lombardo or popularly known as Francisco Antonio Pigafetta. Initially linked to the Order of Rhodes, which was knight, went to Spain in 1519, accompanied by Monsignor Francisco Chericati, and was made available from Carlos V to promote the company initiated by the Catholic monarchs in the Atlantic. Soon, he became a great friend with Magallanes, who accompanied together with Juan Sebastian Elcano in the famous expedition to the Moluccas begun in August 1519 and finished in September 1522. He was wounded at the Battle of the Island of Cebu in the Philippines, in which Magellan found dead. The output of Seville made it aboard of the Trinity. The return, along with a handful of survivors, 17 of the 239 who left this adventure in Victory, ship that entered in Sanlúcar de Barrameda on September 6, the designated year. In the last year of his life, he traveled by land from France to finally return to Italy in 1523. He wrote the relation of the trip, which was the first around the world, Italian and with the title of Relazioni in love to the primo viaggio di circumnavigazione, Notizia del Mondo Nuovo with Figure U dei Passi Scorpetri, which was published posthumously in 1536. The account of Pigafetta is the single most important source about the voyage of circumnavigation. Despite its tendency to include fabulous details, he took notes daily, as he mentioned, when he realizes his surprise to Spain and see that he had lost a day due to its driving direction. Includes description of numerous animals including sharks, the storm petrel, the pink spoonbill, and the Phalium orthopetra, an insect similar to a sheep. Pigafetta captured a copy of the latter near Borneo and kept it in a box. Believing a moving blade who lived in the air, his report is rich in ethnographic details. He practiced as an interpreter and came to develop, at least in 2 Indonesian dialects. Pigafetta also wrote a treatise of navigation, mainly Ptolemaic inspiration, but that contains a description of the 3 methods to determine the length, probably derived from the Francisco Falero. These methods were: first, by calculating the distance from a point of known length by observation of the distance of the moon from the ecliptic. Second, by observation of the conjunction to the moon with a star or planet. And lastly, through the use of the compass, Pigafetta also describes how to take the attitude of the pole star to determine latitude, known the wind direction and other minor navigation problems. Mistakenly believed that the direction of the compass coincided with the meridian of Iron Island. His description of the trip also includes details of the own navigation, as a description of the sun at the zenith, and forwards to readers interested in his own treatise on navigation and Aristotle. Francisco Chiricati was born in Vicenza, the son of Belpietro of the Vicente family of Chiricati. Chiricati studied in Padua, Bologna, and finally Siena, where he completed degrees in civil and ecclesiastical law. During the missions in Spain and Portugal, Chiricati became greatly interested in the recent geographical discoveries and the Voyage reports that were circulating. His house in Barcelona became a meeting place where literature and latest geographical discoveries were discussed. Charles V was the Holy Roman Emperor as well as the King of the Romans and King of Italy. He ruled over the Spanish Empire from 1516 and the Holy Roman Empire from 1519. Along with the Habsburg Netherlands from 1506, during his reign, he consolidated vast territories in Western, Central, and Southern Europe and brought them under his rule. Juan Sebastian Elcano was a Spanish sailor, navigator, and explorer, best remembered for leading the second half of the first round-the-world navigation. Having taken over after death of Ferdinand Magellan, upon his return to Spain, the king presented him with a coat of arms that contained a globe and the phrase, "You went around me first." Magellan's biography, childhood and early life. Ferdinand Magellan was born in 1480, either in Villa de Gaya, near Porto or Sabrosa, near Villarreal to Rodrigo de Magallanes and Alda de Mesquita. His parents died when he was 10 years old, and hence went to the Portuguese court to serve as a page to Queen Leonora, along with his brother Diogo, mainly because of his parents' wealthy Portuguese connections. He was educated at the Queen's School of Pages, Lisbon, and was fortunate to get accustomed to subjects such as astronomy, cartography, and celestial navigation, which proved useful in his later pursuits. Career. In 1505, he joined the Portuguese fleet under Francisco de Almeida, first Viceroy of Portuguese in India, to an expedition to India and Africa, where he spent 7 years. He fought in several battles such as Battle of Canamor in 1506, wounding himself, and Battle of Din in 1509, where the Portuguese destroyed Egyptian ships in the Arabian Sea. In 1511, he was enlisted in Alfonso de Alborquez's fleet in the conquest of Malacca on the Malay Peninsula, thereby getting hold of important trade routes in the region.
He traveled further and explored the Moluccas, known as the Spice Island, now part of Indonesia, home in some of the world's most expensive spices, including cloves and nutmeg. He returned to Lisbon in mid-1513, where he joined the massive 500-ship, 15,000 soldier force sent to Morocco by King Manuel to fight and governor, as he had refused to pay an annual tribute to the Portuguese. Magellan stayed back in Morocco after the Moroccan forces were defeated, where they sustained a leg wound in a skirmish, leaving him with a permanent limp. In 1514, his without permission leave cost him his career, as he was accused of illegal trading with the Moors, which despite denying resulted in cancellation of future employment offers from the Portuguese. Major works. He crossed the 373-mile passage from Cape Virgins of the tip of South America in November 1520, which is today popularly known as the Strait of Magellan. He named the new waters Mar Pacifico, meaning peaceful, as he entered in November 1520 upon crossing through the Strait of Magellan from the Atlantic Ocean, which is today called the Pacific Ocean. Even though as he was killed midway, his crew member Juan Sebastian Elcano continued the journey, thus completing the first ever circumnavigation of the world and proving that the globe is round. Personal life and legacy. In 1518, married his countryman friend Diogo Barbosa daughters Maria Caldera Batriz Barbosa in Seville. The couple had two sons, Rodrigo de Magalhaes and Carlos de Magalhaes, both dying in childhood. While fighting the chieftain on the Mactan Island, he assumed to finish off the war with his powerful European weapons. Out was attacked with a bamboo spear and killed on April 27, 1521. Taro craters Magalhaes and Magalhaes, A on the moon of Magalhaes on Mars, have been named after him by the International Astronomical Union. The Magellanic penguin is named after him since he was the first European to discover this South American good in 1520, which is found in Argentina, Chile, and the Falkland Islands.
Page of honor in the ceremonial position in the royal household of Sovereign of the United Kingdom. It requires attendance on state occasions, but does not now involve the daily duties which were once attached to the office of the page. The only physical activity involved is usually carrying the long strain of queen's dress. It is usually a distinction granted to teenage sons of members of the nobility and gentry, and especially of the senior members of the royal household. Pages of honor featured in British coronations, the state opening of Parliament, and other ceremonies. Did you know that clove was the most valuable spice in Europe during Magellan's time? It was used to flavor food, but Europeans also believed that its essence could improve vision. Its powder could relieve fevers, and mixed with milk, it could enhance intercourse. In 1505, Magellan and his brother were assigned to Portuguese fleet headed for India. Over the next 7 years, Magellan participated in several expeditions in India and Africa, and it was wounded in several battles. In 1530, he joined the enormous 500 ships, 15,000 soldiers, force sent by King Manuel to Morocco to challenge the Moroccan governor who refused to pay his yearly tribute to the Portuguese Empire. In the 15th century, spices were at the epicenter of the world's economy, much like oil is today, highly valued for flavoring and preserving food as well as masking the taste of meat gone bad. Spices like cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, especially in black pepper, were extremely valuable. Since spices could not be cultivated in cold and arid Europe, no effort was spared to discover the quickest sea route to the Spice Islands. Portugal and Spain led the competition for early control over this critical commodity. Europeans had reached the Spice Islands by sailing east, but none had yet sailed west from Europe to reach the other side of the globe. Magellan was determined to be the first to do so. By now, an experienced seaman, Magellan approached King Manuel of Portugal to seek his support for the westward voyage to the Spice Island. The king refused his petition repeatedly. In 1517, a frustrated Magellan renounced his Portuguese nationality and relocated to Spain to seek royal support for his venture. When Magellan arrived in Seville in October 1570, he had no connections and spoke little Spanish. He soon met another transplanted Portuguese named Diogo Barbosa, and within a year he had married Barbosa's daughter Beatriz, who gave birth to their son Rodrigo a year later. And well-connected Barbosa family introduced Magellan to offers responsible for Spain's maritime exploration. And soon Magellan secured an appointment to meet the King of Spain. The grandson of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who had funded Columbus' expedition to the New World in 1492, received Magellan's petition with the same favor shown by his grandparents. Just 18 years old at that time, King Charles I granted his support to Magellan, who in return promised the young king and his westward sea voyage would bring immeasurable riches to Spain.
Strait of Magellan. On August 10, 1519, Magellan bade farewell to his wife and his son, neither of whom he would ever see again, and the Armada de Moluccas set sail. Magellan commanded the lead ship Trinidad and was accompanied by 4 other ships, the San Antonio, the Concepcion, the Victoria, and the Santiago. The expedition would prove long and arduous, and only one ship, the Victoria, would return home 3 years later, carrying a mere 18 of the fleet's original crew of 270. In September 1519, Magellan's fleet sailed from Sanlúcar de Barrameda, Spain, and crossed the Atlantic Ocean, which was then known simply as the Ocean Sea. The fleet reached South America a little more than 1 month. There the ships sailed southward, hugging the coast in search of fabled strait that would allow passage through South America. The fleet stopped at Port San Julian, where the crew mutinied on Easter Day in 1520. Magellan quickly called the uprising, executing one of the captains and leaving another mutinous captain behind. Meanwhile, Magellan had sent the Santiago to explore the route ahead, where it was shipwrecked during a terrible storm. The ship's crew members were rescued and assigned out among the remaining ships. With those disastrous events behind them, the fleet left Port San Julian 5 months later when fierce seasonal storms abated. On October 21, 1520, Magellan finally entered the strait that he had been seeking and that came to bear his name. The voyage through the strait was treacherous and cold, and many sailors continued to mistrust their leader and grumble about the dangers of the journey ahead. In the early days of the navigation of the strait, the crew of the San Antonio forced its captain to desert, and the ship turned and fled across the Atlantic Ocean back to Spain. At this point, only 3 of the original 5 ships remained in Magellan's fleet. Magellan circumnavigating the globe. After more than a month spent traversing the strait, Magellan's remaining armada emerged in November 1520 to behold a vast ocean before them. They were the first known Europeans to see the Great Ocean, which Magellan named Mar Pacifico, the Pacific Ocean, for its apparent peacefulness, a stark contrast to the dangerous waters of the strait from which he had just emerged. In fact, extremely rough waters are not uncommon in the Pacific Ocean, where tsunamis, typhoons, and hurricanes have done serious damage to the Pacific Islands and Pacific Rim nations throughout history. Little was known about the geography beyond South America at that time, and Magellan optimistically estimated that the trip across the Pacific would be rapid. In fact, it took 3 months for the fleet to make its way slowly across the vast Mar Pacifico. The days dragged on as Magellan's crew anxiously waited to utter the magic words, "Land ho!" At last, in March 1521, the fleet reached the Pacific island of Guam, where they finally replenished their food stores. Magellan's fleet then sailed onto the Philippine archipelago, landing on the island of Cebu, where Magellan befriended the locals and struck with a sudden religious zeal. He sought to convert them to Christianity. Magellan was now closer than ever to reaching the Spice Islands, but when the Cebu asked for his help in fighting their neighbors on the island of Mactan, Magellan agreed. He assumed he would command a swift victory with his superior European weapons, and against the advice of his men, Magellan himself led the attack. The Mactanese fought fiercely, and Magellan fell when he was shot with a poisoned arrow. He died on April 27, 1521. Magellan would never make it to the Spice Islands, but after the loss of yet another of his fleet's vessels, the 2 remaining ships finally reached the Moluccas on November 5, 1521. In the end, only the Victoria completed the voyage around the world and arrived back in Seville, Spain, in September 1522, with a heavy cargo of spices, but with only 18 men from the original crew. Seeking riches and personal glory, Magellan's daring and ambitious voyage around the world provided the Europeans with far more than just spices. Although the trip westward from Europe to the east via the Strait of Magellan had been discovered and mapped, the journey was too long and dangerous to become a practical route for the Spice Islands. Nevertheless, Europeans' geographic knowledge was expanded immeasurably by Magellan's expedition. He found not only a massive ocean, hitherto unknown to Europeans, but he also discovered that the earth was much more larger than previously thought. Finally, although it was no longer believed that the earth was flat at this stage in history, Magellan's circumnavigation of the globe empirically discredited the medieval theory conclusively. Though Magellan is often credited with the first circumnavigation on the globe, he did so on a technicality. He first made a trip from Europe to the Spice Islands, eastward via the Indian Ocean, and then later made his famous westward voyage that brought him to the Philippines. So he did cover the entire terrain, but it is not a strict point A to point A around the world trip, and it was made in two different directions. His slave, Enrique, however, was born either Cebu or Molucca and came to the Europe with Magellan by ship. 10 years later, he then returned to both Cebu with Magellan and Malacca after Magellan died by ship on the Armada's westward route. So, Enrique was the first person to circumnavigate the world in one direction from point A to point A.
Navigator Ferdinand Magellan killed in the Philippines. After traveling 3/4 of the way around the globe, Portuguese navigator Ferdinand Magellan was killed during a tribal skirmish on Mactan Island in the Philippines. Earlier in the month, his ships had dropped anchor at the Philippine island of Cebu, and Magellan met with the local chief who, after converting to Christianity, persuaded the Europeans to assist him in conquering a rival tribe on the neighboring island of Mactan. In the subsequent fighting, Magellan was hit by a poisoned arrow and left to die by his retreating comrades. Magellan, a Portuguese noble, fought for his country against the Muslim domination of the Indian Ocean and Morocco. He participated in a number of key battles, and in 1514 asked Portugal's King Manuel for an increase in his pension. The king refused. Having heard unfounded rumors of improper conduct on Magellan's part after a siege in Morocco, in 1516, Magellan again made the request and the king again refused. So, Magellan went to Spain in 1517 to offer his services to King Charles I, later Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. In 1494, Portugal and Spain, at the prompting of Pope Alexander VI, settled disputes over newly discovered lands in America and elsewhere by dividing the world into two spheres of influence. A line of demarcation was agreed to in the Atlantic Ocean. All new discoveries west of the line were to be Spanish, and all to the east Portuguese. Thus, South and Central America became dominated by the Spanish, with the exception of Brazil, which was discovered by the Portuguese explorer Pedro Alvarez Cabral in 1500s and was somewhat east of the demarcation line. Other Portuguese discoveries in the early 16th century, such as the Moluccas Islands, the Spice Islands of Indonesia, made the Spanish jealous. To King Charles, Magellan proposed sailing west, finding a strait through the Americas, and then continuing west to the Moluccas, which would prove that the Spice Islands lay west of the demarcation line, and thus in the Spanish sphere. Magellan knew that the world was round but underestimated its size, thinking that the Moluccas must be situated just west of the American continent, not on the other side of a great uncharted ocean. The king accepted the plan and on September 20, 1519, Magellan set sail from Spain in command of 5 ships and 270 men. Magellan sailed to West Africa and then to Brazil, where he searched the South American coast for a strait that would take him to the Pacific. He searched the Rio de Plata, a large estuary south of Brazil, for a way through. Failing, he continued south along the coast of Patagonia. At the end of March 1520, the expedition set up winter quarter at Port St. Julian. On Easter Day at midnight, the Spanish captains mutinied against their Portuguese captain, but Magellan crushed the revolt, executing one of the captains and leaving another ashore when his ship left St. Julian in August. On October 21, he finally discovered the strait he had been seeking. The Strait of Magellan, as it became known, is located near the tip of South America, separating Tierra del Fuego and the continental mainland. Only 3 ships entered the passage. One had been wrecked and another deserted. It took 38 days to navigate the treacherous strait, and when ocean was sighted at the other end, Magellan wept with joy. He was the first European explorer to reach the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic. His fleet accomplished the westward crossing of the ocean in 99 days. Crossing waters so strangely calm at the ocean was named Pacific, from the Latin word pacificus, meaning tranquil. By the end, the men were out of food and chewed the leather parts of their gear to keep themselves alive. On March 6, 1521, the expedition landed at the island of Guam. 10 days later, they reached the Philippines. They were only about 400 miles from the Spice Islands. After Magellan's death, the survivors in 2 ships sailed onto the Moluccas and loaded the hulls with spice. One ship attempted unsuccessfully to return across the Pacific. The other ship, the Victoria, continued west under the command of the Basque navigator Juan Sebastian de Elcano. The vessel sailed across the Indian Ocean, rounded the Cape of Good Hope, and arrived at Seville on September 9, 1522, becoming the first ship to navigate the globe. How relevant the document is in reconstructing the past of the Philippines and its people. Antonio Pigafetta was a key player of one of the most amazing world exploration trips. He was born in Vicenza in 1492, and he was an Italian seafarer and geographer. The relevance of his own venture fundamentally lies in the fact that he took part to the first globe circumnavigation between 1519 and 1522, and he was able to accomplish it after the murder of Ferdinand Magellan, leaving a detailed description of the journey in the report of the first trip around the world, a lost manuscript that was rescued later in 1797 and today is considered one of the most important documentary evidence relating the geographical discoveries of the 16th century. Antonio Pigafetta, fascinating and fleeting personality for scholars, he still represents a partial mystery. About him, too little is known to define a satisfactory profile on the biographical side. Documents and the testimony of contemporaneous are scarce, and his own character primarily appears from what he wrote in his own report. His own narration about the First World Circumnavigation was one of the greatest achievements in the history of Navy exploration and discovery. It helped us to have an idea on our knowledge about our culture and our ancestors, and also he proved that it is possible to sail around the world and make a record about the whole trip.